Most importantly, now, the most important things to start tattooing realism, your basic tattoo kit, must include 3 things in my opinion. Patience, drawing, and good taste. And this is a topic that I extensively talk about in the workbook. These are 3 things that I think we always forget when we're starting out. Especially because, what do you want to do when you start? You want to tattoo. This sounds very familiar. Tattooing as soon as possible, and that's a big mistake. You shouldn't start tattooing until you're really ready. Tattooing in the end is an act of huge responsibility. Clearly, you're not going to get the same results on your first tattoo than as on number 100, for example. But you must fulfill basic standards, and you will fulfill them if you pay attention to these 3 things. Read it in the workbook when you have time. Don't rush. It's important to me that you understand the relevance of these 3 concepts. Patience is absolutely important. That's why I have that word tattooed on my fingers. For example, what time will we finish the tattoo? I don't know. Don't push me. I'm a realism tattoo artist. A traditional tattoo can be roughly calculated in hours. It's true that realism can be calculated, but most of times you'll be wrong. It happens to me all the time, every week, especially if you're a perfectionist. So be patient. Work on your patience. In the workbook, you can find links and resources to learn how to work on patience. It's easier than it looks. You need patience to make mistakes. You need it to repeat things as many times as needed. And this is crucial in realism. You also need it to spend the time that every tattoo or drawing requires. You also need it to understand, for example, that you're not going to get paired for a second session because you only budgeted 1 session and the client just couldn't bear it, or the skin got too red and you couldn't work. So you need patience for all this. You also needed to give time to the tattoo artist you've got inside, to your professional side, to give yourself time to improve. You need it so that you don't rush, since there's no rush. And if you're in a rush, you're not going to do things right. Rush should be out of the equation. If you're an impatient person and you have no intention to change this in the way you work, it's very, very difficult for you to be a realism tattoo artist. It's really very complicated. Drawing is equally important. No one draws worse than they tattoo, and no one tattoos better than they draw. So, learn to draw. It's easy, right? It's a very clear concept. If you don't get very realistic results in your drawings, and you ask yourself, how can I make my tattoos more realistic? The answer is right in front of you. Improve those pictures. When you get it, automatically, like magically, you'll improve your tattoos. It's something obvious and basic, but the truth is that we all forget about this all the time. It's like something we know, but we try not to hear. Yes, we need to draw more. I know, I don't have the time I wanted to do now. I'll draw next week. Well, tattoo as much as you want, but you're not going to do it right if your drawing base is terrible. That portrait you drew that doesn't look like the reference, when you tattoo it, it's going to be even worse. This is maths. You can draw realism with a pencil. You can do it with a charcoal, or you can do it with markers. You can also draw on an iPad or any brand of digital tablet with Procreate, for example, the application we all use. But be very careful with this. Technologies are useful, but they are not essential. With a traditional pencil drawing method, you can learn and improve your realism a lot. You don't need anything else. This is pretty basic, and it's important to do it that way. from time to time. Run away from technologies sometimes, and especially in drawing, limit you or will limit you rather than benefit you. I tattoo with a needle in a handmade way, but I draw only on the iPad. It doesn't make sense to me. I use the iPad to do stencils and not much more, to be honest. And yet it's not essential. I could do the stencils perfectly without the iPad. It's useful when you go on a trip, for example. You can draw on it, on the plane, at the hotel, wherever you want, without having to carry too many things. You can even imitate the sensations of drawing with pencil. But it doesn't make sense that this is your only way of artistic expression if you're a tattoo artist. Feelings, when you draw on paper and when you draw on glass, are very, very different. I'd say they're totally opposite. And good taste, as I tell you in the workbook, is absolutely fundamental. Or it's been something absolutely fundamental in my career. Nobody's born wise, this is true. But you're not born with good taste either. It's something that requires training, it requires exercise. It's a bit subjective, it's a bit relative, but it's noticeable. Good taste exists. And if you have bad taste, and you don't know how to distinguish a hideous tattoo from a perfectly executed tattoo, then you won't know when you need to improve your own work. Or if, for example, if you show the picture of a tattoo to a friend and they tell you that they see one eye bigger than the other, well, you won't know if that comment is justified. To yourself, you'll think, well, it's not that bad. Or, I've been only tattooing for a year, right? Control your ego, be self-critical, and do it with criteria.